So beginning of chapter 6, everything that we learned that was a trend, and even in chapter 5, those trends are going to allow us to understand chemical bonding, why bonds form, why some of them are ionic bonds, some of them are covalent bonds. So right now, let's just talk about what those trends were. So for what we're going to show here, the important ones were the effective nuclear charge. Remember, that's ionization energy and electron affinity. So all of these relate to why certain ions form. So remember, these two are either to remove or put an electron on an atom, the amount of energy. So to remove or put on an atom means that ions are forming. So those ions, when they form, they could possibly make an ionic bond. They would make an ionic bond if those ions formed and then those opposite charges attract. So you would need a cation and an anion to come together and form the ionic bond. So the example of the ionization energy is here. So ionization energy was the amount of energy to remove an electron from a neutral atom in its gas phase. So there's a certain amount of energy that happens here, and remember there's a trend for how high or low that amount of energy is needed. And then over here is the electron affinity. So notice for electron affinity, we've added an electron. So there's a certain amount of energy associated and a trend for adding an electron to a neutral atom or an ion. So depending on the likelihood or the energy amount that has to go in to cause this to happen, if you're able to have a sodium atom turn into an ion and a chlorine atom turn into a chloride ion, then once those charges form, if they are close enough to each other, then they can attract each other and form the ionic compound. So something else that we're going to talk about with these ionic compounds, and then when we get to covalent compounds, is how strong is this bond? So depending on if it's ionic or covalent, or even when it's ionic, there's certain properties to each one of these ions now that changes the strength of the bond.